It's a miracle that we can watch silent films at all, considering that most of them aren't available to be seen. They're gone, either having gotten lost or been destroyed. The ones that we can see tend to be heavily degraded or they have missing scenes. Old film prints are highly flammable, and film preservation wasn't in place until many decades after the advent of filmmaking. There are numerous examples of warehouse fires destroying tons of films from the silent era. That's partially why the silent films that did survive are so beloved. Most of their contemporaries are lost, and probably will remain that way. The early Oz films were not immune from this tragedy. There are several Oz films that I unfortunately can't talk about in detail because, well, they no longer exist. Even the 3 films from the Oz Film Manufacturing Company that we looked at before, they have missing scenes. But I do want to give these missing films a shout out just in case they should ever resurface in part or hopefully in their entirety. First up is a film called The Fairy Log and Radio Plays from 1908. Well, I say a film, but it was really more of a combination of film and stage performance, with L. Frank Baum himself interacting with the characters both on stage and on the screen. So it was an early example of multimedia. It was not financially successful, and it only played for 2 months before having to be shut down. And it also apparently led to a personal bankruptcy for L. Frank Baum, which is pretty sad. No footage of this film exists, and this is one of the few surviving stills, but it was an early example of film scores being preserved and documented, which I'm thankful for that at least. It must have been something to see if you were alive at the time. Next up come the lost films from Otis Turner, who made the 1910 version that started off Oztober. His subsequent films, Dorothy and the Scarecrow in Oz, The Land of Oz, and an adaptation of a different L. Frank Baum story called John Doe and the Cherub, are all now unfortunately lost. Press releases from the moving picture world indicate that they would have derived from the first 2 Oz books and the aforementioned John Doe and the Cherub. But again, they don't exist, and there's not a whole lot else to say, so let's move on to the final pick of these Lost Oz films, The Land of Oz, a sequel to The Wizard of Oz, from 1932. Pretty ungainly title, I have to say. At first, I thought this film was going to be a sequel to the 1925 version, but it's apparently an adaptation of The Marvelous Land of Oz, which is the second most adapted Oz book behind The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. It's a short film, only a 2-reeler, and the soundtrack on the second reel is apparently lost. The film ends on a cliffhanger where our heroes escape the Emerald City on the back of the Tin Man, not the Gump like in the book, but the Tin Man. So yeah, the Tin Man can fly. Makes a whole lot of sense. I wasn't able to find anything too definite about this film. Some footage is said to have been found, but it hasn't been made public yet, and other sources have said that the footage that does exist was intended to be part of a serial. Who knows? As I mentioned before, the previous Oz films that we've looked at also have missing footage, which is why they may appear to be more disjointed than they were necessarily intended to be. Hopefully these missing films, footage, and soundtracks can be found one day, and missing pieces of Oz history can be filled in. Alright, that does it for the silent era. Once The Jazz Singer came out in 1927, the sound era had officially begun, and let me tell you, it took hold very quickly. It was not considered to be a novelty or a fad in the same way that some technologies like 3D would later be. Sound was there to stay. Later on in the 30s, Technicolor came along and presented the stars of the silver screen in their full glory for the first time. Could the Land of Oz be realized in this same way? I think you know the answer to that. Stay tuned tomorrow as we explore the 1939 MGM classic, The Wizard of Oz.